with all of you. Okay, so we're recording everybody on their best behavior. My name is Kathy Hansen. And with me is Jennifer or Jen Larson. And we've given you our contact information as well. We are here to support you going forward. We'll both be here this morning. Jen will exit for just a little while, but then she'll be back. But I'll be here with you all morning, and you'll be hearing, actually, no, you don't get to hear my voice. You get to hear Anne's voice. But we're here to support you going forward. Anything that you need with these certifications, any questions you have, feel free to reach out to us, and Anne would be able to help with that as well. So with that, we would like to get to know some of you. So we would love to have you introduce yourselves and tell us what you're hoping to gain from this session and your certification. So Anne, I'm going to let you take the room for that.
Anh cứ nói như bình thường. Hi Katie and Jen, anh giới thiệu anh là ai và anh mong muốn nhận được cái khóa học này.
Brian.
My name is Brian. And I work in Chico CPD firm. What I want to receive from this course, that I want to discover the 4 side DISC and to find out what the motivator inside each of us. And after completing this course, I want to become a DISC coach in order to introduce about DISC to everyone.
Thank you, Frank.
Xin cảm ơn Brian.
Hello there. My name is Tracy. I'm a coach in CB, and from this course, I would like to master the knowledge about DISC, and I also want to be flexible in these DI, S, and Z, and I would like to use this knowledge in deeper understanding so that I can like teach and help others people, especially in my for my students in my business and my colleagues. And I hope with this knowledge I can be better for a business coach in the future. Thank you.
Xin chào Kathy, xin chào Jan. Tôi tên là Lê Anh. Tôi là một coach trong CB Firm. Và tôi nhận ra rằng là tất cả những cái vấn đề mà con người đang có là do sự giao tiếp không được thấu hiểu nhau. Do vậy tôi có hỏi rằng với cái chương trình học DISC trong chuyên nghiệp này thì chúng tôi có thể lĩnh hội được tất cả những cái kiến thức sâu hơn để chúng tôi có thể thấu hiểu khách hàng của mình, chúng tôi có thể thấu hiểu đồng nghiệp của nhau và tất cả những mọi người khi cùng làm việc và sinh sống và cuộc sống hàng ngày để chúng ta có thể giúp cho nhau phát triển mọi cái tiềm năng bên trong thông qua cái đặc biệt thì có và đặc biệt bản thân của mình.
Chào, tôi tên là Sang Yuli, hiện nay là business coach. tôi muốn hiểu sâu hơn về DISC, để có thể thành công hơn trong việc truyền thông và giao tiếp với tất cả mọi người. Xin chào em, xin chào các bạn. Tôi là Phúc của CBD. Tên tôi là Lisa. Đến buổi này thì tôi mong muốn là sau khi khóa học này tôi có thể sử dụng DISC.
I can use DISC in applying for my clients in their leadership and also in the building a business culture in selling, and this is a very good tools for me for training for my clients. Thank you.
Great.
Xin chào Kathy và xin chào em. Tôi là Rita. Với khóa học này thì tôi mong muốn thứ nhất là mình hiểu sâu hơn về DISC và Implementer. Cái thứ hai là tôi mong muốn làm thế nào để mà có thể chia sẻ nhiều hơn cho tất cả mọi người trên thế giới này về cái việc là chúng ta phải ứng xử theo phong cách hành vi của người khác, chứ không phải là cứ những cái thói quen là theo cái phong cách hành vi của mình. Thì từ đó thì tất cả những cái việc giao tiếp sẽ gắn kết với nhau hơn, gắn bó với nhau hơn và đạt được những mục tiêu trong cuộc sống của mọi người.
Xin chào hai cô. Tôi là Kaka. Và đến với khóa học này thì tôi chỉ có hai mong muốn thôi. Thứ nhất là học để thấu hiểu bản thân mình và những người gia đình. Thứ hai là có thể dùng cái kiến thức này để huấn luyện và đào tạo cho người khác, cải thiện việc giao tiếp để có việc của mình được tốt hơn. Cảm ơn.
Xin chào, tôi tên là Jason. Cái khoa học qua DISC này thì tôi muốn là làm thế nào sâu hơn về DISC và motivator. Nữa là tôi có thể ứng dụng một cách linh hoạt với với khách hàng, với gia đình cũng như là với người xung quanh, và làm cho tôi để về DISC.
Xin chào, tôi là Thi Hồ. Tôi là tốt của ACCD Farm. Khóa học này thì tôi muốn đi sâu, muốn đi học thật sâu về motivator. Bởi vì tôi cái DISC của tôi là khai thác cách giúp người khác xây dựng DISC thông qua cái điểm mạnh của mình. Chính vì thế mà tôi tìm hiểu về motivator để hiểu rất sâu về điểm mạnh, điểm yếu của người khác và có thể giúp người thành công thông qua cái điểm tốt của mình.
Hello, Kathy, thanks. Tôi là co-owner của CBD Firm. Tôi tham gia tất cả các chương trình này. Đầu tiên thứ nhất là tôi muốn trở thành một master của DISC. Tôi muốn tôi có giải thưởng assessment ở Liên Quốc. Cái thứ ba là tôi muốn triển khai rộng rãi cái DISC đến tất cả các nước của tôi. Thì tôi thấy cái này một trong những cái rất tốt. Tôi muốn phải chi tiết tuyển dụng đào tạo cũng như là hiệu suất lao động của các nhân viên ở công ty của tôi. Thank you.
Okay, we finished the
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. We look forward to meeting all of those objectives, and we're glad that you are here and ready to learn. So with that, let's dive in and get started. So today, here are, go back here, our learning objectives for today. So we're going to learn how to identify and recognize behavioral styles and develop skills of adaptability through thoughtful, deliberate communication. And I believe that's exactly what a lot of you said you were hoping to get out of today. The second thing we're going to do today is we're going to complete DISC practitioner certification. There will be some follow-up work for you to complete before we certify you, but today is the big day for all of this information. We're going to show you, we're going to include some resource examination, application, and a little bit of practice to effectively present, train, and coach. And I know that that is the goal for many of you today, if not all of you. Any questions about our objectives today? No? Okay. So our platinum rule is something a little bit different than what most people know as the golden rule. We generally make the mistake of assuming that others interact and think the same way we do. But the platinum rule says treat others as they want to be treated. And that's because we're not all wired in the same way. Some people are very open and they're very direct. They'll walk right up to you, introduce themselves, and they're very friendly and open right away. Other people are more reserved, maybe quieter, maybe seem a little bit shy, and both are okay. It simply means that we're wired differently, and that's the key to understanding the styles with DISC. So what is DISC? So it is a, excuse me, sorry, let me get to my correct slide here. Okay, it's a needs-motivated, observable behavior and emotion. So it's really important to know that what we're talking about with DISC is that it's about observable behavior and emotion. It reveals our preferred natural and adapted styles based on our blend. Here's what DISC is not. It's not a measure of intelligence, skills, education, or experience. It's also not an indicator of personal values. A lot of people make the assumption that DISC is a personality test. It is neither. It's only one part of our personality. It's not all of it. And it's also not a test, because that would indicate that there are right and wrong answers. And there are none here. This is what is true for you. So it's really important to know that. That's why we call this an assessment instead of calling it a test. Okay, so we know that we have 4 DISC styles. The first one is the dominance, and they are focused on problems and challenges. We have the influencing style, and they are focused on people and contacts. We have the steadiness style. They're focused on pace and having a consistency of an environment. And finally, we have the conscientious or analytical. They're focused on procedures and compliance. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the natural style versus the adapted style. I mentioned that just a moment ago. So the natural style is our perception, or it's your self-perception rather, of the real you, or how you would choose to behave without the influence of anyone or anything. It's also your typical response in stress. So think of it as sort of your knee-jerk gut response to life. A lot of people make the assumption that this is just you at home in a comfortable environment. And while you might often get to be the natural you in that setting, if you are sharing your space with anyone at home, or if there are any expectations from you at home, that may not always be the case. So again, think of it as the most truest, authentic you, if left to your own devices without any influence from anyone or anything. Your adapted style is the self-perception of how you think you need to behave within a given situation or relationship. So this might change in different environments, situations, or roles. So when you think of, when you take the DISC assessment, you're asked to identify what is least like you and what is most like you. It's really easy to determine what is least like us, right? Because we're very, very clear about that and very authentic about that. That helps determine our natural style. And over time, that does not typically change very much. It can, but it would change very slowly and over a long period of time, usually due to life circumstances. What's harder to determine is what is most like us. And when we answer those questions, we often think, well, it depends. It depends on the situation, or it depends on who I'm talking to. That's exactly right. And that's why that is known as our adapted style, because we will adapt and change naturally in different environments and situations. Okay, so let's review. What is DISC? I'm gonna have you, since you're all in the same room, let's have you actually discuss each of these, maybe in partners or 2 or 3 people, just to make sure you have a clear understanding. So if you would take a moment to discuss what DISC is, and when you discuss that, what DISC is not. And then in a moment, I'll have you move on to the second question. So go ahead. Anne, how is the pace? Is the pace okay, Anne?
It's okay.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Okay, so now, why is DISC helpful and useful?
Just wait. I let them turn the discussion first. Okay.
Okay, and now what are the 4 DISC styles?
Just give us 1 second, Patty. I can tell you when to start. Can you speak a bit so I let me check whether they can hear your voice through the phone. Nó có ra được
không phải là
nó quả là DRC không mặc
hai cái loa để cho ra bằng máy nhỏ.
Okay, and finally, what are the natural and adapted styles? And Anne, just let me know when you think they are done.
Okay.
Okay.
Katie,
Yes? All good? Okay. Okay, you ready for me to move on, Anne?
Hang on just a minute, Kathy.
Okay. Okay, okay. Okay, so now we move to identifying the 4 styles. So we have the D style, the I, the S, and the C. So we see that the C's and the D's tend to be more guarded. The S's and the I's tend to be more open. The D's and the I's tend to be more direct, where the S's and C's tend to be more indirect. Okay. Okay, so in your report, you're going to see this wheel. Now, your wheel is going to look a little bit different than what we have here. We've replaced these numbers with the letter combinations that each segment represents. So when you see this in your report, it will not have these numbers. These numbers were a little confusing, so we made it better and we put the letter combinations in there. Okay. So what you're looking at here are 3 different ways to identify the style of another person overlaid on top of this model. So in the center here, you see the 4 quadrants with those terms: direct, indirect, guarded, and open. Okay. On the outside of the wheel, you see the terms like very assertive, very persuasive, very supportive, and very analytical, and then you see blends of each of those. That's another way to identify the style of another person. And then on these outer corners, you see the...
One second.
Okay.
1 second. Mọi người nghe thầy cô được không? Hay là... ok. Được, thì nghe thầy chị giao hai bên chị sẽ nghe không nghe được gì bên ngoài cả.
Nghe cái kiểu gì đâu chị ạ?
Again from the beginning of this slide because
Oh, I can't hear you very well, Anne.
Because sound system. Can you repeat? Can you repeat from the beginning of this slide?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So this disc wheel
Đây là bánh xe của DISC á.
is in your report, but it's going to be a little bit different than what you see here because this one has numbers. Yours will have the letter combinations that each segment represents. So it's much easier to understand. The numbers were a little confusing, so we replaced them with the letter combinations. Now, what you're looking at here are 3 different ways to identify the styles overlaid on top of this model. So in the center, you can see these 4 quadrants with the terms direct, indirect, guarded, and open. That's one way to identify the styles. On the outside, you see the terms like very assertive, very persuasive, very supportive, and very analytical, and then you see the blends of those. That's another way to identify the styles. On the outer corners are a third way to identify the styles. These are the pace and priority terms, and this is where we begin to see tensions between the styles. So over here by the D, you see that they are faster paced and they are task oriented. The I's are faster paced also, but they're people oriented. The S's are slower paced and people oriented. And the C's are slower paced and task oriented. So again, this is where we begin to see tensions between the styles. It doesn't matter which of these terms you use to identify the styles, so long as it makes sense to you and to the people that you're working with. One more thing to note about this model. You see here that it is a polarized model, which means the D and the S are opposites of each other. The I and the C are also opposites of each other. Now, when we talk about tension between the styles, it's important to know that those tensions can exist both externally with people of different styles than us, but also internally if we have more than one core style, which is very, very common. Okay. Okay, questions on that slide? Okay, we'll move on.
Just one question that can you repeat about the opposite, the conflict of the opposite from different sides? Can you repeat again? Thank you.
I can sort of hear you, Anne. It helps if you get closer to your computer.
Okay. They want you to repeat a bit deeper about the opposite style.
Yes.
I mean the opposite of the style. Okay.
Okay. Yes. So the D and the S are opposites of each other in terms of their behavior and their emotions. So the D, notice, is very fast-paced. The S is slow-paced. The D is task-focused. The S is people-focused. So they're polar opposites of each other. You would notice then that, for example, a D who is fast-paced and task-oriented, they might be impatient, okay? The S would be the opposite. they would be very, very patient. The I and the C are opposites of each other as well. Notice that the I is faster paced and they're people oriented. The C is slower paced and they are task oriented. So complete opposites of each other. If you compare, for example, the C and the S, certainly the C is task focused and the S is people focused, but they are both slower paced, so they're not complete opposites of each other. Does that help, Anne? Okay, good. Excellent. Okay, so when you are, whoops, let me go back one. When you are identifying the style of another person, there are a couple of questions that you can think about or ask yourself. You wouldn't necessarily walk up to a person and ask these questions, but you can ask yourself these questions as you observe their behavior. And that's the key, is constantly and consistently observing the behavior of other people. So ask yourself, are they direct or are they indirect in their communications? Okay, so if they're direct, that means they're a D or an I. If they're indirect, they are a C or an S. So if you can answer that question, you've already eliminated or narrowed it down to 2 styles. The second question that you can ask yourself is, are they guarded or are they open in their communications? If they tend to be more guarded, then they would be a C or a D. If they are more open, then they would be an S or an I. And think of that too as the S's and I's are focused on people. That's why they're a little more open. The C's and the D's are focused more on tasks, so they're more guarded. Okay, does that make sense to everyone, Anne? Are we good? Okay, so I'm gonna have everyone in the room try a little activity. I'm gonna have everyone get up, get the blood flowing. And I'm gonna have everybody, for just a moment, greet 3 other people in the style of a D. Go.
Very good Ds.
Okay, now everybody greet at least 3 other people in the style of an I. These are great eyes. Okay, and now everyone greet each other in the style of an S.
Oh my gosh, they're so good.
They're good. They're good. They get it. And now in the style of a C.
That's my favorite.
I know. Hey. Okay, very good, everyone. Okay, let's go back to our seats. Very good. We are impressed. Okay. Very, very well done. So now in your reports, you will also see this section, but I want to give you some information about this. So this part of your report is what we call static. That means it's the same information for everybody. It's not specific to any one person. And what it tells us are the needs, the observable behaviors, and the fears of each of the styles at the high level. Now, notice at the top, you see the D, the I, the S, and the C. And in those columns, everything in that column pertains to that style. Right underneath here, you see this gray bar that gives us the disc focus of each of the styles. So a high D is focused on problems and tasks. An I is focused on the people, the social connections. The S is focused on the pace and environment. They're making sure everybody's okay and that the team is taken care of. The C is focused on the procedures, compliance, data. And then here we see the needs, the observable behaviors, and the fears of each style. So for example, a high D actually needs challenges to solve. They need to have authority. They're observed as being decisive and risk takers. And they fear being taken advantage of or having lack of control. Let's talk about the opposite style like we did before on that previous wheel. So the S style has a need for systems, teams, and a stable environment. They fear, they are observed as being very patient, and they're the stabilizers in the room. And they fear sudden change or having loss of stability and security. And you can read each for the I's and the C's as well. Now this right here is what we like to call the super cape of DISC. You can kind of be a bit of a superhero here if you get really proficient at this. Because if you can identify the style of another person and you then know what their needs are and what they fear, you can learn to effectively modify or adapt your behavior for mutual benefit. And that's the goal. It does not mean change who you are fundamentally, but it means that in the moment, if you, for example, are a high D and you are okay with change and implementing change, but the people that you're working with are S's, or maybe you have a high S on your team, if you just announce that a big change is coming and they have no time to prepare, that's probably not going to be as effective for them. If you modify your behavior for that person and give them an opportunity to plan things out, maybe help you plan it out for a better result, maybe they would even be able to, for example, see unintended consequences that you as a high D might not be thinking about. And so if you give them time to prepare for that change, it could really make the entire process much more effective, and it would reduce the stress level for that S. Versus coming in, throwing out a change, and wanting them to come on board immediately. They probably would do it, but it would be more effective to give them time. Does that make sense? Any questions on this one, Anne?
Yes, there's one question.
Okay.
Về trọng tâm DISC á, thì về cái người S á, cái trọng tâm của họ là tốc độ và môi trường vì họ là người chậm, đúng không ạ?
Yeah. Can you explain again about the focus of each type of DISC
especially for the S type, because you mentioned here that the S, they focus on the place and the environment. Can you explain further about this?
Yes.
Thank you.
So you bet. So this disc focus right here is what each of the styles is focused most on. Now the S's, since that's the question being asked, they're focused on the pace and environment. What that means is, remember, they're the stabilizers. So they're scanning the room. They're focused on people like the eyes are, but they're focused on people in a different way than the eyes are. They're more slower paced. They like to plan things out. They're making sure that everybody in the room is taken care of. We like to joke that the S's are the ones that, for example, bring treats to the meeting because they're thinking about everybody else. They're the planners. They want to make sure that that everything goes smoothly and that everybody has what they want. If the pace is too fast, they're going to be the ones taking care of that or noticing that. They're making sure that in the environment that they're in, that everyone's taken care of. Notice right here that they have a need for systems, for teams, for a stable environment. So that's what they are focused on. The D's, on the other hand, are focused on the problems and the tasks. They will also often say things like, I'm here to solve problems. And that's what their first thought is. So that's why their need is to have challenges to solve and to be in a place of authority so that they can be the problem solver. Does that help?
Có nghĩa là con có phải hiểu như là đúng hay không? Đối với cái người S đó, thì cái trọng tâm của họ đó thì họ cần phải đảm bảo an toàn. Cho nên cái tốc độ á, là cái mà họ nghĩ là nó sẽ tạo ra cái môi trường an toàn, thì cái tốc độ nó vừa phải với họ. Chứ còn nếu mà tốc độ đi nhanh hơn cái này họ sẽ không cảm thấy an toàn. Đúng không?
Yeah, let me repeat her understanding about the part that you explained about the S type. That means because the S is a stabilizer, they request the stability. And that's why
you're kind of cutting out. You're cutting out, Anne.
You hear me well?
There, yeah. The closer you are to your computer, the better.
Okay, so Leanne repeat here that the S type, they need the low space and they need the time in order to make sure that the environment is safe and everyone is taken care. So that's why they need to focus on the environment and they need to focus on the pace.
Correct.
Okay.
Very good. Do you want me to also cover the I and the C, or do they feel they're clear on that?
Các bạn có muốn cô nói lại thêm cả như vậy cho phần C, phần I và cái khác không? Hay là chỉ cần yes, we want you to do it.
Okay, yeah. Great. So the I's are focused on people in terms of being social, having those social connections and relationships. So that's why they have a need for those social relationships and a friendly environment. I like to say that the I's tend to spread glitter over everything. They're the ones who will tend to be very, very open and friendly. They'll come in and they'll meet 10 people immediately. They will introduce themselves rather than wait for someone else to introduce to them. They are very optimistic. And they tend to be very trusting of others. Because they are very socially aware and focused on social relationships, they fear being left out. They don't want to be the one left out of the party. For example, I had a friend that I was talking with just the other night who met her friends, her girlfriends, for a fun girlfriend weekend. And she had waited for about 6 hours in the airport for everybody to arrive. So she was completely exhausted. But she is a high I style. And even though she needed a nap desperately, she did not want to miss out on anything that was going on. So she just made it happen, and she skipped the nap and she went out with her friends, and she literally said the words, "But I know that they're in the tiki bar having margaritas, and I don't want to miss out on that." So they have a fear of being left out, and they have a fear of having loss of social approval. Okay. The C's are the opposite. They're very analytical. They tend to be quiet, and again, very indirect. They have a need. They're focused on the procedures, the rules. They're focused on compliance. They want to do things right. Because of that, they have a need for rules to follow and data to analyze. That's where their brain works best. They're more observed as being cautious. They really think things through. They make very careful decisions because they want it to be the right decision. They fear being criticized or loss of accuracy or quality. And that makes sense because their goal is accuracy. They want to make sure that the data and the rules are accurate and that they are they're doing things right. So specifically, their fear is of being caught having made a mistake or made an incorrect decision. Does that make sense to everyone, Anne?
Okay.
Okay, good. Excellent. Okay, so let's talk about the emotions of each of the styles. So for the D, the emotion is anger and impatience. Now that does not mean that they're angry all of the time. What it means is that they have a very high sense of urgency. Remember that they're focused on problems and tasks. And so they have a high sense of urgency for getting things done. So the higher the plotting point, the higher the tendency, the D will have a short fuse or be more impatient. The lower the D, the opposite is true. The more the person tends to be patient and slow to anger. The I emotion is optimism and trust. I's won't always know how things are going to get done, and they tend to be very distracted, but it's going to be great in their view. Everything is going to be great. That's why we like to say they tend to spread glitter over everything. The higher the plotting point, the more the I person will look on the bright side and exhibit a high trust level. Again, everything's going to work out fine. And to them, if they try something and make a mistake, it's no big deal. They'll just do it again. And then they will have learned something. So they'll always look on the bright side. The lower the I, the more the person tends to be pessimistic and exhibit a low level of trust. So they tend to be a little more suspicious. The S's are very patient and they are non-expressive. They tend to be the hardest ones to figure out because what's going on the inside is typically not what they're showing on the outside. It doesn't mean that they don't have emotions. Everybody does. But it does mean that they don't feel the need to share their emotions with everybody. So the higher the plotting point, the more the S will avoid showing true emotions. They appear fine and they seem patient. So they really could be falling apart on the inside and you would never know it. The lower the S, the more people hear and see their emotions. Now, here's an additional note for the S's. The high S appears open, but their true emotions are actually concealed. The C emotion is fear and concern. The higher the plotting point, the more the C will follow rules and they'll need data and facts, proving the need to do things right and avoid being wrong. The lower the C, the more likely the person is to take risks. Rules are merely guidelines. I often say with low C's, rules, what rules? Okay, are those clear, Anne? Any questions on those?
Any question? Yeah. It's clear now. No question.
No questions?
No question. Yeah.
Okay, great. Wonderful. Okay, so let's review. Okay, so in the room, if you would partner up again and review each of these questions. The first is, what are the characteristics of each style? So let's talk first, talk with each other first about the D. What is the D like? And then what is the I like? And what is the C or S like? And what is the C like? And let me know when you think it's ready, time to move on to that second question.
Okay. How many minutes you give for each question?
I like to just make sure that they're pretty clear. I tend to just kind of scan the room, and if I feel like they're done, then I move on to the next one.
Okay. Khi nào share xong câu 1 thì mọi người báo để Khánh chuyển vào câu 2.
Laughter is good. Okay, do you think we're ready to move on to the second question, Anne?
Yes.
Okay, great. So how can we identify the 4 styles?
Vâng, chúng ta sẽ cùng thảo.
Okay, and the next one, what are the needs and the fears of each style? Okay, next one, Anne, what are the needs and the fears of each style?
Ta sẽ tiếp tục trao đổi về cái nhu cầu và nỗi sợ hãi của mỗi loại nhân cách. Okay, and then what are the emotions of each style? Chúng ta sẽ nói về cái cảm xúc thể hiện ở mỗi loại phong cách là gì. Emotion.
Katie, can you back to the slide, the previous slide, please? Yes, yes, that's one. Cảm xúc đấy, cái này xong mình sẽ phải sửa lại. Cái này không phải là thái độ đâu, mà là cảm xúc. Emotion, cảm xúc có thể hiện ra. sao cô nói?
Thì đó cho em bài
Okay, Anne, are they ready? Are they ready for the last question?
Yes.
Or do they need more time? Okay,
Và mọi người
good.
sẵn sàng với câu hỏi cuối cùng chưa?
Okay, so the last question on this one, Anne, is normally about me, but since I'm not there and they can't hear me, they won't know. So I'm going to ask them if they can decide what style they think you are.
Ok. Câu hỏi cuối cùng của cô ấy là thông thường nếu cô dạy trực tiếp trên lớp ấy, thì cô sẽ hỏi mọi người là đoán xem phong cách của cô ấy là phong cách gì. Đấy, nhưng bởi vì là cô ấy lại học chỉ nhìn được qua màn hình thôi, cho nên là mọi người sẽ đoán là phong cách của anh của chị anh đây là phong cách gì. Mọi người nhìn thấy chị nhiều hơn.
I think they can guess both.
Ah, nice.
Your style and my style.
Nice. Nice. Good job. Okay, very good.
Let's say that Kathy, your style is the T and C. And the other say that you are SC.
Oh, for me?
Yes, for
Oh.
you, your style.
Oh, my style. Okay. Are they're not hearing me, are they?
They can hear. Cô hỏi là có nghe được giọng cô ấy không? Lúc đấy có nghe được không?
Okay. Well, that's very interesting.
Do you want them to hear your voice now?
So what you can say is that I am deliberately adapting for mutual benefit right now.
Hiện nay là cô đang adapt, cô đang phải thích nghi với mình vì lợi ích của cả hai bên. Yes.
So I am the one who usually, I'll tell you this, Jen often calls me glitter girl.
Glitter. Tức là mọi người, cô là một cái người, mọi người hay gọi cô là một cô gái rất là vui vẻ đấy. Glitter luôn luôn gọi là đi chào hỏi mọi người. So you are high I.
Yes. I am an IS.
Cô là IS. IS.
So if I was there, we would be having a party at the end of this training.
Vâng, cho nên nếu cô mà ở đây thì cuối buổi chắc chắn chúng ta sẽ có tiệc. We can do party online. They are
awesome. I will totally do that. Very good. Okay. All right. So let's move on. Okay. Okay. So looking at pace and priority, this is where we begin to see tensions among the style. Okay, so let me get this right here. There we go. Okay, so our C's and our D's have a pace challenge because the C's are slow paced, the D's are fast paced. The same tension exists between the S's and the I's because the S's are slower paced. They like to plan things out, think things through. And the I's are faster paced. They're both focused on people, but their task, or excuse me, their pace is a challenge. We also have priority challenges. So the D is focused on, remember, tasks, where the I is focused on people. They're both fast-paced, but they have a challenge between in their priority. Their priorities are different. Task, people. Same thing over here between the C's and the S's. They're both slow-paced, but the C's are focused on tasks. The S's are focused on people. So there's going to be tension. And then we have what we like to call our double whammy. This is where the styles are opposites of each other, and so they have both pace and priority challenges. So remember here, the D is fast-paced and task-focused. The S is the opposite. They're slow-paced and people-focused. So there will be tensions. The I is fast-paced and people-focused. And the C is slow-paced and task-focused. So there will be tension. And remember, towards the beginning, I said that those tensions can exist both externally, when you are a different style than another person, but also internally. If you have more than one core style, meaning you have more than one style that is a high score, you will experience some tension, or you'll learn to balance it out. Does that make sense? Let me know if there are any questions, Anne.
It's okay. Okay, no question.
Okay, great. Oops. Okay, so partner discussions, a lot of partner work today. Why is it important to understand our own behavioral style and the styles of others? Go ahead and discuss that with a partner. Okay. I can tell there are good discussions going on, and they're very good students. Okay, so let's move on to adaptability, because that's what we're talking about here. So, highly adaptable people determine what types of behavior are most appropriate and in specific situations. And again, I want to stress that this does not mean that we are asking you to be someone that you're not. We're simply saying that it is more effective to adapt in specific situations for mutual benefit. So it's not changing who you are. It's just adapting in the moment for the specific situation. We know that adaptability is important to all successful relationships. And by the way, no one style is naturally more adaptable than another. And I'll just throw in there, no one style is better or worse than another. Each style brings something of value to the table. So adaptability is based on two elements. It's about flexibility, which is your willingness, and aptitude, which is your capability. So to adjust your approach or strategy based on the particular needs of the situation or relationship at a particular time. But here's the key. Willingness specifically is a choice. We know that everybody is capable, but willingness is that choice. You can choose to be adaptable with one person and not with others. You can choose to be quite adaptable with one person today and less adaptable with that same individual tomorrow, depending on the situation. We like to say that sometimes people aren't willing to play in the sandbox. But ultimately, we know that it's critical for all successful relationships. Any questions on that page, Anne?
Yeah. So the meaning here is that they just re-explain the understanding is that the adaptabilities depend on two factors, whether the person want to adapt or not.
Yes.
And the second is that they have the knowledge or the competence to adapt or not.
That's correct. Exactly right.
Đúng
Well
rồi.
done.
Vâng, rất tốt. Thế còn Hằng có nói về cái việc là kết quả test làm sao? Em nói lại cái đấy để chị giải thích.
They should imagine me sprinkling glitter all over the classroom. They're doing great.
Okay, and I now have one remarks here also that, for example, if we do the test for one person and the result of, that means the person do the test many times and the result stay the same, it means that they don't want to change, or that means they don't want to adapt, or is that correct?
That is quite possible. The thing to remember is that we can only control what we do. So we can't expect others to adapt to us. We can only make the decision to adapt to others. And so it is true that somebody else might choose over and over again to not adapt, and there's really nothing we can do about that. We can only have control over what we do. Does that help answer that question?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, so we're going to review one more time, and then, oh, I think this was additional, sorry. I should have had that on the page. Okay, so we'll do a quick review, and then we're going to take a break. Okay, so quick review. What are the pace and priority of each style? So let's take each one. I'll actually walk through this one. Let's take each style. The D style. What is the pace of the D style? And what is the priority of the D style?
Và cái thứ tự ưu tiên của người D là gì ạ? Fast. The D focus on fast and high pace.
Yes, fast and high pace. Go, go, go.
Làm.
And the I, what is the pace and priority?
Tốc độ của người I là high pace and focus on people.
Perfect. And the S style?
Còn người S ạ? Slow and focus on people.
Correct. And the C style?
Còn người C ạ? Slow and focus on tasks.
Oh, they are so good. Okay. Okay, so now, what are the conflicts that exist with each style interaction? I'm going to have them talk about this in partners and compare any styles and talk about the tensions between those styles.
Vâng, chúng ta sẽ nói về những xung đột nào về từng loại. Như chúng ta các loại không biết tương tác với nhau. Ở đây chúng ta sẽ chia tạo ra để chúng ta biết nhắc lại cho từng cái đối tượng và từng loại xung đột có thể cho các loại hành vi. Rồi, bắt đầu trước đi ạ.
D2 và
xung đột toàn bộ và
So Anne,
yeah.
I'm gonna throw out a couple of combinations and see
Yes.
how they do.
Okay. Okay.
So what are the tensions between an S and a C?
Và bây giờ mọi người sẽ nhắc lại cho cô là cái mâu thuẫn giữa người S và người C ở đây là gì? S, you may ask S and C, right?
Correct. Yes.
So the tension is in terms of task and also in terms of focus on, I mean, one focus on task and one focus on people, and the pace is also different.
The pace is actually the same. They're both slow paced.
S and C, S and C, yes, same page, but conflict in focus. One focus on people and one focus on task.
Correct. So it's only priority that is different.
Như vậy là họ sẽ khác biệt xung đột về thứ tự ưu tiên. Priority.
Okay, what about, let's try C and D.
Bây giờ chúng ta lại thử tranh luận về xung đột của C và D ạ. C and D conflict on the pace. In C is slow and D is fast.
Yes, perfect. And one more, let's do I and C.
Thế còn giữa I và C thì xung đột những gì ạ? They have both conflict in the pace. I mean, one quick and one slow, and also in priority. One focus on people and one focus on task.
Perfect. That's exactly right.
Và
Now I'm going to tell you that it is possible for a person to be both a D and an S. Same person can be a D and an S. We do see that combination sometimes. We also see that some people are I and C. So that's a lot of inner tension that would happen. So that's just a comment that I'm going to throw out there. We can talk more about that later. Okay, so next question to discuss with your partner. What is adaptability? Okay, and why is adaptability important? Okay. All right, how is everybody doing?
Vâng, mọi người học về thế nào ạ? Good.
Okay.
Good.
Okay, so we're going to take a break. So, what do you think, Anne? 10 or 15 minutes? What would they prefer?
Okay. 15 minutes.
Okay, let's start at a quarter. Oh boy, I don't even know what time that is for you. Is it 9:30?
15 minutes from now.
Yeah, 15 minutes from now. Okay, we'll be back. Recording again. There we go. Okay, so now we're really going to get into some more technical information. We're going to talk about constructing and deconstructing our DISC debriefs. Okay, so when we do a DISC debrief, it's really important to ask rather than tell. And I'll demonstrate this when we get to some of the pages that I'll give you. I'm going to give you a roadmap for how to read some of the pages. So I'll demonstrate what I mean by that. You want to use the page, you can use the page-by-page debrief guide to support you. So we're going to send you a page-by-page guide, which will assist you. We've actually sent that forward to be translated for you. And there's also a report highlights resource that you can use. So what this does is that it pinpoints pages that might require more explanation. So a lot of the report people can just read and understand, but there are certain sections of the report that really needs a practitioner to help uncover what's beneath the surface. And that's what this certification is all about. So you are all going to be experts at this very, very soon. Okay. So the report debrief includes an introductory page, and then there are also several pages that are bullet pointed. We lovingly call them the bullet point pages. They get right to the point. The I's and the D's tend to love the bullet point pages. The S's and the C's tend to love the pages with a lot of explanations. Okay, so we're going to spend a little bit of time on these pages, and I don't know if is that blurry for them, Anne?
Các bạn nhìn rõ hay là hơi mờ mờ? Chúng ta có cái quyển list của mình nữa không? They can see on the big screen.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
And if they can't see it super clearly on the screen, they can look on their own reports if they brought them.
Và nếu như mà chúng ta không nhìn rõ được ở trên màn hình, chúng ta cũng có thể nhìn vào cái bản báo cáo.
Okay, so this is where I'm going to spend a little bit of time explaining what's beneath the surface here.
Và phần này thì tôi sẽ giải thích về cái phần mà gọi là nội dung của cái này là gì.
So this is what we call our word sketches. We have one for the adapted style and one for the natural style. And you remember the difference between those two. Are there any questions between the natural and adapted styles and what they are before we move forward?
Vâng, nhưng trước khi chúng ta tiếp tục thì các bạn có cái câu hỏi gì về cái phong cách hành vi thích ứng và phong cách hành vi bẩm sinh hay không? Chúng ta có hỏi việc chúng ta hiểu rõ thế nào là thích ứng và thế nào là tự nhiên rồi đúng không ạ, hay là bẩm sinh rồi? We can move on.
Okay, great. So looking first at just the adapted style, notice that everything is written in columns. So you see the D, I, S, and C columns. So everything underneath.
Katie, just one, yeah.
Yes.
They have one question. So please hold on and we answer the question.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Yes.
Tức là nó sẽ nếu mà mình muốn thay đổi thời gian của bao lâu thay đổi được.
Yeah, they have one question about the natural style and the behavior of the adapted style. The first question is that whether we can change our natural style and in what kind of condition or what type of environment and for how long, or we need how long in order to change that natural style. And also for the adapted style, can we change it and it take how long to change it?
So the natural style is, again, the truest, most authentic you. So it's think of it as this is how you are wired. So it typically does not change. If it changes, it will be over a very long period of time and typically due to life circumstances, life experience. But for the most part, if you're a high I, you're going to typically remain a high I throughout your life. Typically, we do see some shifting of the natural style, but it's not common. And again, it takes a very long period of time to make that change, and usually due to life circumstances. The adapted style can change just like that on a dime. So imagine you are talking to your very, very best friend in the whole world, and suddenly your boss walks in. You will instantly change. Or maybe you're talking to your spouse and your child walks in. So you will change immediately in those circumstances. Does that make sense?
So, yeah, so the question is that in terms of when they do the assessment, when they do the test and then the results come out, so in order to make the result come out most accurate, I mean, they need to think about work, focus on work when they answer the question, or how? Please explain.
That's correct. It's very important with the assessment to maintain the same focus throughout the whole assessment. Now, the way ours is worded, most people are answering the questions based on their work environment. So it's really important that throughout the assessment that they think about that focus. If they're bouncing around and thinking about, well, this is how I would answer at work, this is how I would answer if I'm at a party, the results are not going to be accurate.
Cái kết quả trong khi chúng ta làm mà chúng ta lại có tâm thế lúc thì đang tập trung công việc, lúc thì là tôi sẽ hành xử thế này ở một nơi công cộng hay là ở nơi là bàn tiệc, thì như vậy cái kết quả đưa ra nó sẽ không chính xác.
Okay, does that make sense?
Mọi người hiểu phần này chưa? Khi làm cái gì thì cái ý thức của mình trả lời câu hỏi là phải tập trung vào cái phần đó.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what that means then is if you answer these questions based on your work environment or whatever environment it is, then this adapted style is your perception of how you think you need to be in order to be successful in that environment. And it may or may not be different than what your natural style is. And that's part of what we are assessing when we go through a report with a client. So let's deconstruct this page. I'm going to give you a roadmap for how to read what we're looking at here. So this is this person's adapted style or work environment. So again, and we're looking at the graphic on the left here. This is their perception of how they think they need to be at work in order to be successful. So notice at the top, you have columns. You have the D, I, S, and C columns. Everything underneath each column pertains to that disc style. And again, you've already seen this section now. So right underneath these letters, you have the gray bar that gives you the disc focus for each of the styles. And we've already gone through this top section that gives us the needs, the observable behaviors, and the fears of each style. So now let's go down to the bottom section. And we're looking at clusters of descriptive words next to a scale of 1 to 6. Oops, there we go. So this scale of 1 to 6 measures your intensity in that style. Intensity means frequency. So the higher your score, the more frequently you are showing up as that style. The lower the number, the less frequently you are expressing that style. I think expressing is a really good word for that. So again, the higher the number, the higher the score, the more you're expressing that style. The lower the score, the less you're expressing that style. So for this person, we look at the highlighted boxes and we think about it in terms of the disc focus and their intensity. So for this person, of course, actually you guys have a different graph than I have. So my words are not going to be the same, but this person scored as a 2 in their D. So that means that when it comes to a focus on problems and tasks at work, they could be described as mild, they seek consensus, they're unobtrusive, and they weigh the pros and cons. Does that make sense? And I'm not sure why I'm not being able to unmute you so I can hear you.
Yes, because I did myself.
Ah, okay. Does that make sense to everybody?
Các bạn đã hiểu rõ hơn phần này chưa? Yes.
Okay. And when it comes to a focus on people in terms of social relationships at work, this person is charming, influential, sociable, and trusting. And when it comes to a focus on pace and environment at work, this person is consistent, cooperative, possessive, and relaxed. And when it comes to a focus on procedures in the work environment, this person is their own person. They're self-assured, they're opinionated, and they're persistent. Now, when I do a debrief and I go through each one of these, I describe each one and I ask the person, does that make sense for you? Remember when I said we ask, we don't tell. That's what I'm talking about. So each time you go through the descriptions, you read them and you ask them, does this make sense for you? And typically they will say yes. Every once in a while, a person might say, it's mostly true for me, and that's okay. Sometimes there may be a description that they don't agree with, and that's okay. What we want to think about is that these are tendencies for our style blend. So every once in a while, there may be a description that isn't exactly accurate, but typically they're able to see themselves in that grouping of descriptive words. Does that make sense? Okay, so now notice that there is a thin gray line in between the 3 and the 4. We call this the energy line, because what we're talking about here is where are we placing our energy with respect to each style. So when we score above this energy line, like this person scored above the energy line in their I and their S, that means they're putting their energy into that style and focus. And that means it's expressed behavior. Typically, that means other people will be able to observe that behavior in us. Anytime we score below the energy line, it means that we are pulling our energy away from that style, and so it is concealed behavior and emotion. Means we typically won't experience them as that style. Now notice, this person is a 3. That's right under the energy line. So that means that every once in a while, it could quite possibly be that if they need to suddenly focus more on procedures and rules, they'll jump above that line and express that style. In most cases, this person will not show up as a D. It doesn't mean they can't ever be a D, but if they do, people will notice because that is not normal for them, at least in this adapted style. Okay, everything making sense?
Yes, okay.
Okay, excellent. Another way to think of the adapted style.
Okay.
Oh, go ahead. Was that a question?
She just asked by the energy line because it's not clear, not so much clear in the screen. It's okay. Okay now. Yeah.
The energy line. Okay. So this energy line is the divider
Đấy chính là cái đường để chia đôi
between expressed behavior
cái biểu gọi là
and
cái hành vi biểu tỏ
concealed.
ra và những cái biểu đạt mà nó.
So if you score above the energy line, that means you're expressing this behavior. So if somebody were to interact with this person, they would probably, and if they were asked what is their style, others would probably say they're an I and an S. Below this energy line means you're pulling your energy away. You're resisting that style. And so you're likely not going to show up as that style.
Okay.
Does that make that more clear?
Vâng, mọi người hiểu rõ chưa? Okay.
Okay, good. Another way to think of the adapted style is that it's a snapshot of time. So again, this can change. This is just this person's perception of how they think they need to be at work in order to be successful. So now let's look at their natural style. We read it in the same way, but we look to see what has changed. Now again, this is the natural style. So this is who we are underneath everything. This is our truest, most authentic self. And over here is where we're adapting. So in this person's natural style, their D is actually a little bit higher. Their I is exactly the same. Their S is a little bit lower. And notice that their C jumps up above that energy line. So now it's expressed behavior in their natural style. So this person actually has 1, 2, 3 styles that are expressed. Okay, does that make sense to everyone? Are we good to move forward, or is that a hand in the back?
Yeah, there's a hand. Yes, question.
Yes.
Đi mà cùng ai mà cái người ở mức 1, 2 thì sẽ mâu thuẫn với người 5, 6. Nghĩa là sao?
Em đang hỏi của báo cáo của một người hay là em so với người này với người
Người
kia?
này với người kia. Nhưng mà trong cùng trường cột đây chứ, thì người này là ở điểm 5, 6, người kia ở điểm 1, 2 thì cái đó là gì đó.
He has a question about this table, but for for 2 people, when they compare, one is low D and one is high D. Is that means these 2 people are conflicting? I mean, they have a conflict.
They probably will have conflict. That is correct.
Họ có thể, tức là cái hiểu đấy của em là có thể đúng, thì họ có thể có mâu thuẫn nếu như mà cái điểm số của họ lệch nhau như vậy.
And if they want to get along well, they will need to learn how to negotiate that. Now, let me give you 2 different scenarios, however.
Và một lần nữa thì chúng ta sẽ có cái cùng 2 cái bối cảnh để gia đình. Nhưng mà
that could be tricky. And they would have to intentionally work on those tensions. But if they can learn the value that each one brings, then they can be more effective together. So think of it this way. A low D is similar to a high S, because remember, those are opposites. So you have those relationships that are outside of your home, whether that's work or socially or anything like that. When you have people that are a different style, there can be tensions. However, it can also mean that you can actually partner really well with a person that has the opposite style as you. For example, my husband, in his adapted style, is a C and a D, but I am an I, and we are fantastic together. And it's because we naturally look for things that we are missing or that we're not strong in. And so I'm not strong in the D category or the C category. I am not good with paying attention to details unless it's related to work. In my personal life, there are things that I completely miss if it's not super important to me. But my husband will totally pay attention to those things. So we work really, really well together. Does that make sense?
Yes, okay.
Okay, good.
Yeah, one more question.
Okay.
Tiếp xúc lần đầu tiên với những người cùng học cái phong cách của mình, thì làm sao mà để mà mình có thể hòa quyện được các cái người mà đó là cái phong cách làm việc của mình để bổ sung cho nhau tốt hơn.
Ý em nói là công việc hay là trên gặp khách hàng rồi
Trong công việc mình trong cuộc sống luôn.
Sấy rồi em sẽ cho hiểu của
Thế là nó đang nói là ý là trong cuộc sống của mình làm những người giống mình. Không có ai thì mình phải làm sao mà những người khác mình thay đổi là tốt những gì mình
Yeah. And the question is, I don't believe in life because of the law of attraction that in life and fixed life. So we always need the people who look like us or who behave like us. So how we can do what we can do in order to meet with the different style like us and cooperate and complete each other.
Was that a question for me, Ann?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, you weren't. I could not hear that. Sorry.
Yes. Let me repeat again. That is, her question is that in life, in normal life, because of life and sex lives, we normally
Oh, sorry, you're cutting out.
Yeah, the question here is that we normally meet people who behave like us, and so how we can meet the people that are different like us, and then we can cooperate with them or we can complete each other.
Oh, are we talking about personal relationships?
Not only personal relationship, in every aspect of life, even in works or in personal relationship too.
Okay, so the question is how to find people that are different than us?
Tức là làm thế nào để tìm được những người khác mình nữa ha? Để có thể hợp tác. And how we can adapt with the people who are different than us in order to cooperate well together.
Yes, okay, so how to adapt, okay. Very good question. So, so for example, I am an I, and so I tend to wake up in the morning and I joke that I practically fly out of bed. I get up very early and my brain is working and I'm ready to roll. My husband takes his time. He's a different style. So I intentionally pull back my energy just a little bit so that I don't overwhelm. Because I know that he's a different style. Let me give you another example. I used to work with a person who made everybody high five them before they would speak to him. And he drove everybody crazy. Now, if he had been self-aware, he would not have done that, because there are people who are very guarded, who are quiet and personal, and they did not like having to interact with him in that way. In fact, when he showed up at work, he was loud and kind of announced his presence, and you can see people turning around and going the other way or going into their offices and closing the door because he was there. If he wanted to have more effective relationships, he would have recognized that and brought down his energy level intentionally so that he wasn't so aggressive, I suppose, or in people's faces or making them high five him, because that's kind of offensive to some people. So if he learns how to be more intentional, he'll have better relationships. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. We just they discuss about. So we go back to the. I mean, we talk about the adaptability of a person when they want to adapt with other style, and so we need to have both factors. I mean, we need to have the willing to adapt, and then also secondly, we need to learn how to adapt. So we need to practice more in order to have the talent, or we say that we can be natural in adapting with others.
Right. So if we know that if we can identify that somebody we
Right.
work with or that we're in relationship with has a slower pace and they really think things through, we would not want to talk fast and kind of change the subject often. We would want to stay focused and talk slower so that they can better connect with us. Okay.
Yeah, then I have a question.
Đối với cái người mà họ có cái phong cách hành vi bẩm sinh á, so với lại cái phong cách hành vi mà thích ứng thì nó có sự thay đổi so với cái điểm năng lượng đó, cái đường năng lượng đó. Tức là ví dụ như là phong cách bẩm sinh của họ, phần C á, nó dưới cái năng lượng, phần S á, nó trên cái năng lượng chút. Nhưng mà khi qua thích ứng á, thì phần C nó lại nhảy lên trên điểm năng lượng, và cái phần S nó lại nhảy xuống dưới.
Là có sự khác biệt giữa cái tự nhiên và cái thích ứng.
Đúng rồi. Vậy thì á, là nhưng mà hồi nãy mình đang nói là cái phong cách bẩm sinh ấy, thì nó là cái mà thể hiện người ta tự nhiên nhất. Tức là khi ở trong cái môi trường mà người ta thoải mái, người ta không cần che đậy gì, người ta sẽ thể hiện như vậy. Còn cái phong cách thích ứng á, thì họ thay đổi theo cái môi trường, nhưng mà cái thích ứng đó thì nó thường là nó không kéo dài, đúng không?
Mà từ cái một năm hai phong cách hành vi bẩm sinh của em là đi tới A tới C tới F, nhưng mà không trên lệch nhau lắm nha. Đi khoảng 25 tới 50, C A là 50% á, rồi tới C là khoảng 50 và F 45, tất cả đều hợp trên điểm năng lượng hết. Nhưng khi bắt đầu chiến lược 2016 2017 làm tổng đốc design và làm tổng đốc sự tốt, thì một trong những áp lực là cả hai được phát triển và cả hai đều phải tồn tại. Thì lúc đó em xác định mọi thứ như ở trên mục tiêu công việc là đi với C và ai là nữa. Thì sau đây 6 tháng là đi với C của em nó tăng lên tới 90 luôn, mà anh nó tụt xuống dưới 30 20 không thấy nó luôn khi test. Qua một lần sau khi chiến lược nó hoàn toàn mà nó đáp ứng được rồi á, thì lúc đó em cân bằng lại và em kêu là, tức là quan điểm của em nói là mình cũng phải dạy những người không phù hợp với chiến lược để họ thực tiến, chứ không phải là họ đến với mình thấy không phù hợp thì cho họ ra. Thì lúc đó mình có thời gian rồi, thì lúc đó em dừng lại, bắt đầu em ví dụ training, em dùng kỹ năng, em gần gũi với mọi người hơn, em chia sẻ nhiều hơn để vượt những người yếu lên. Thì lúc đó tự nhiên ai nó cao hơn đi, cả F nó vượt lên trên và C nó xuống dưới. Thì hình dung không? Xong đến một giai đoạn em cần là tất cả quy trình trong công ty nó phải thực hiện ra bên ngoài, thì C em tăng và D em tăng và F tự nhiên nó giảm. Cái đó nó phụ thuộc rất là và nhiều vào chiến lược và thao tác mục tiêu là gì, môi trường đó là gì, và cái môi trường đó là đi ra ngoài.
Ok, vậy thì cái câu hỏi rằng là nếu như khi mình
nhưng mà phải
tốt cho khách hàng ấy, hoặc là như thế nào đó, thì vì mình còn phải dựa trên cái mức năng lượng của người ta nữa, cái điểm là cái đường năng lượng, đúng không? Vậy thì vì là của hàng là tất cả mọi cái nó đều nằm ở trên rồi, thì có những cái nằm ở dưới, đúng không?
Do you want me to give another example, Anne?
No, because Leanne have it's like a question, but then Anna can explain a bit about, because Leanne's question is how we can behave or behave with people that have the difference between their natural and their adapted style.
Yes.
Because for example, and then also we need also to depend on the result, showing whether the result is above the energy line or below the energy line, that we can have a proper strategy to interact with that people, because they all coach, so they need to understand that in order to interact with their coaching client.
Yes, so you can really only adapt based on what you see. And in most cases, when you're interacting with a person, you're interacting with your adapted style and they're interacting with their adapted style. Remember that your natural style is your truest, most authentic you, but that may or may not be what you are displaying, and it may or may not be what they are displaying. So when we're interacting, we're always interacting with our adapted style. And the key is to constantly be observing behavior and emotion. So the key again is to respond based on the style that we see in front of us. And that can be a challenge because it changes. It can change from moment to moment. So that's why it's important to really have an understanding and practice identifying the styles. And then we can intentionally learn to adapt. It takes a lot of practice, but over time you will start to it'll start to be automatic and you won't have to think about it. For example, let me give you another example. If you know that a client is a high D, and you can tell that because they come in, they get right to the point, they're very fast paced, let's get through this, come on, come on. You know that if you tend to take things slower and really go through things methodically and analytically, they're probably going to become impatient. You as a practitioner would need to adapt to their style in that moment when you're interacting with them. So if you know that they're a D based on what you're observing and their behavior, then you would need to get right to the point. Give them information in bullet points. Don't give them narratives. Don't talk for a long time. Get right to the point. Give them some actions. But if you know that a client is an I, and you'd be able to tell that right away because they tell a lot of stories and they like to talk about themselves and they're very open. They want to talk a lot, usually about themselves. You would want to spend some time talking to them and building the relationship first before you get down to the details. If you can tell that it's an S style in your presence, and you have the data to look at as well, you're going to know that they're going to want a plan and they're going to want to talk it through. You're also going to want to spend some time building rapport because they are people focused. If you have a C style that you're working with, you know they're going to want to see facts and data, and they're going to want to analyze the information. So you're going to want to spend a lot of time focusing on that kind of information. They're not really going to be the person that you want to sort of chit chat with and build rapport with, because they're more about the facts and the data. Now you're going to have people who are a blend. So for example, let's say you have a DI combination, a person who has both a high D and a high I. You know that they are very fast paced, So the pace is going to be really fast for you. But you know that they also want you both focus on the facts and the information, get to the tasks, let's get some results. You also know that they're very social. So you're going to want to build that rapport with them. Does that help? Does that make sense?
Đã có mình cũng đã có ví dụ đi thì khi mà mình đã lượng giải mình đã lượng giải cho khách hàng á, thì với cái khách hàng ví dụ như là đi của họ đang thấp như vậy thì mà họ dưới cái điểm và cái đường năng lượng đó, đúng không ạ? Thì mình sẽ hỏi giống như nãy cô đã giải thích là mình sẽ đặt nhiều câu hỏi hơn và mình hỏi rằng là những cái điều này nó có đúng với bạn hay không, đúng không ạ? Rồi nó có ý nghĩa gì với bạn hay không? Nhưng mà khi nó đã nằm ở dưới cái đường năng lượng thì có vẻ như người ta sẽ gặp thách thức hơn khi người ta thay đổi, đúng không ạ? Vậy thì ok, chị hỏi là chị muốn rõ này ha. Vậy thì là với cái người mà người ta đã khó thay đổi nhưng mà người ta không phải là cái người được học DIC, chị hiểu là mình đang học để mình có thể là
để mình tương tác
với đó. Nhưng nếu ví dụ như với một cái người khách hàng của DIC đi mà mình đang cần phải luận giải cái bài này cho người ta,
câu hỏi của chị thì nó hơi mang tính chi tiết hơn vào một cái kết quả mà nó như thế này thế kia rồi, thì em nghĩ là cái đấy mình sẽ để vào phần thực hành sau khi cô ấy bắt đầu cô sẽ show ra một loạt các cái để mình thực hành thì đó nó sẽ dễ hơn, bởi vì là cái của chị nó sẽ hơi am hiểu là nó đi vào chi tiết.
Dạ đúng rồi.
Giả sử người ta có C hay không có C ở dưới tận sâu cùng với lại C rất thấp đi, nhưng khi đi xin việc vào một công ty tự nhiên cái C với cái D nó tăng. Lý do là khi bước vào một cái công ty mới là mình không có thể làm gì khác ngoài việc là theo cái gì được quy định. Khi bạn đi vào một công ty mới làm việc, các công ty yêu cầu 1, 2, 3, 4 là bắt buộc tự nhiên bạn phải có C trong một tháng đầu tiên, bởi vì nếu như không có bạn đâu biết làm gì khác đâu. Tức là theo tôi là một. Thứ hai, bắt buộc bạn phải có dominant, bởi vì thế này này, bạn chỉ có 1 tháng thử việc thôi. Nếu như không hiệu quả bạn thì ra khỏi công ty. Cho nên dù bạn có C hay không có C thì vô một cái môi trường mới tự nhiên nó cũng sẽ không biết thêm cái
nó còn tùy, tức là cái đấy nó còn tùy vào công việc gì, nó còn gì nữa cơ, chứ cũng không phải là kết luận yêu cầu như thế. Nên câu hỏi là đây là chị đang
hỏi là cái này mình đang nói là luận giải, là mình nhưng mà người anh nói đúng là có nghĩa là có thể là mình nó sẽ chi tiết sau. Tại vì ví dụ như là cái bài này đối với anh ok, mình có thể điều chỉnh được, hoặc là ví dụ như có những người mà những cái DIC đó.
So there's one more thing I want to point out on this, Anne.
Yeah, I think that the concern here is more about how to debrief the report for different style, and because they have a little bit of confusion for the people that if, for example, if the person is have the score below the energy line and they cannot express it, and how we can make the clients understand the report and how to debrief the report to them.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay, so with this person, here's what I would tell this person.
Vâng, ok, bây giờ cô sẽ nói, chẳng hạn như cô sẽ giải thích về cái này với cái người mà có cái báo.
Okay, so I would tell this person, in your adapted environment, in your work environment, this is your perception of how you think you need to be in order to be successful. Your D is pretty low, so your focus on problems and tasks in your D style is low. You're all about people. You're all about relationships and making sure that the team is working well. You're paying attention to the pace and environment, and you're paying attention to the people. The procedures you're not as concerned about, but sometimes because it's a 3, it could pop up above that energy line and you might express it. But from right here, this day when you took the assessment, you are mostly concerned about the people in your world, in your work environment. Below this energy line, is your D and your C, and that means you're not really putting energy into those two styles at work. Now, in your natural style, you're similar but a little different. In your natural style, your D is higher. When you're adapting to work, your D is pulled back a little bit. Not a lot, but you are pulling back on your D a little bit at work. Your I is exactly the same between your natural and your adapted or your work. In your natural, you're a little bit of a lower S than in your adapted. So that means when you go to work, you're putting more energy into your S than you do in your natural style. And in your C, this is where you are in your natural. You're above the energy line. You're expressing that C, but it's really close to the energy line. At work, you're pulling back on that focus on procedures and rules in your work environment. Does this make sense for you? And that's the key, is that we ask them questions along the way. Does this make sense for you? Does it make sense that you are typically here with your D and you're pulling back on it a little bit at work? Does it make sense that you are here in your natural and you're exactly the same in your adapted? Does that look right to you? And the same for your S and then your C. So we're simply telling them what the data shows and asking them if that seems accurate to them, if it makes sense. It's extremely rare for a person to say, this is not accurate. If that happens, it is every single time that something major has happened in their life and they are in transition and therefore unsure of who they are in their work environment. But for the majority of people, this is totally accurate. And so they usually say, as you can go through this conversation, yes, that makes sense to me. Yep, I'm definitely a little bit more of a D than I am at work. And so on. Does that help explain that, Anne?
Yeah, they have a question to confirm.
Okay.
So he wants to confirm that, for example, if a person with the D very low in natural, for example, and also in adapt, but now they know that already and they willing to increase the D. I mean, they want to adapt in order to have a higher D. Now can that person do this, right? And
yeah.
He or she will be teaching or will be taught how to do it in order to increase the D, right?
Yes, and that's the conversation that you have, and we're going to actually get even further into this when we look at the graphs.
Vâng, tức là đúng là như vậy, tức là đấy chính là cái nền tảng mà trong cái gọi là cái cuộc trao đổi và chúng ta sẽ đề cập đến cái đấy kỹ hơn nữa khi mà chúng ta nói về từng cái sơ đồ một trong cái phần bài tập phía sau. Okay.
Right. And we're going to look at whether or not it is necessary or effective to change who you naturally are. We're going to look at if you make significant changes to who you are naturally, what that does to you in terms of your energy. And in some cases, if it's an extreme change, that can actually stress you out. It can cause health issues. So it's not necessarily that the goal is that you change who you are. Sometimes it's necessary, but that isn't always the goal. The goal is to be as effective as possible. So we're going to look at that further. Those are very, very good questions. And I think when we get to the graphs, that will become more clear. Very, very good. Oops.
Yeah, we can go on. We can go on.
Okay, great. Okay, so now just to quickly review that, we want to talk about, on the word sketches, we want to talk about those column relationships. So we saw the D, I, S, and C at the top, and everything in those columns. We want to identify that intensity scale, the 1 to the 6. We want to discuss the natural to the adapted style. And we want to constantly ask for feedback to check for understanding. Those word sketches actually go very quickly because we're simply telling the person based on their scores, this is how you scored and this is how you appear to be showing up at work. Does that make sense to you? And this is how you appear to be in your natural style. Does that make sense to you as well? So now let's look at the graphs. We're again going to look at the adapted versus the natural style. And we always adapt from what is natural to us, okay? If we adapt at all. And now we're gonna look at the same information side by side. And now the scale is from 0 to 100 instead of 1 to 6. So we're going to look at this at a much more granular level. And there are several things that we're going to look for on these graphs. We tend to spend a lot of time on the graphs during a debrief. So this is the key page. Okay, so it shows our style blend. So we can see all 4 styles because we are a blend of all 4 styles. We're not just 1 or 2 styles. And this way, it's easy, when we look at the graphs, it's easy to compare the adapted to the natural to see the shifts in behavior and emotion. So there are a few things that we're going to look for here. Okay, so these are some things that are kind of unusual. Bear with me here. Oh, sorry, Anne, I think I see. Bear with me for just one moment. Okay, I think I see a missing page. So I'm going to just tell you what we look at here. So there are 3 different things that we look for on this side-by-side graph. The first thing that we're going to look for are shifts in the styles between the natural and the adapted. So we're going to compare the D, the I, the S, and the C on both graphs. And in particular, we want to pay attention to any shift in a style of 20 points or more. The reason for that is because when we shift by 20 points or more, that takes a lot of energy. And we want to make sure that if it's necessary to do that, that we're not draining our batteries. So let's compare on this one. The D goes from 20 in the natural down to 12 in the adapted. So it's a drop of 8 points. That's not very significant. And they're both very concealed. I should note that the 50 line here is now the energy line. So anything below this energy line means you're pulling your energy away from that style. It's concealed. Anything above that energy line is expressed. So there isn't much of a shift in the D. The I shifts from 41 all the way down to 16. So that's pretty significant. That is a, let me do my quick math here, 25-point shift. Now, they are concealed, so they're already pulling their energy away from it. So it's probably not going to be as noticeable to that person, but they are still dropping their I by 25 points from their natural to their adapted. The S in this case is almost exactly the same. They are going from being an 82 in their natural to an 87. So they're putting about 5 points more energy into that S. That's not very significant. And their C is just about the same as well. It's only a shift of 7 points. Not very significant. Now, if a person is significantly shifting, we need to ask 3 questions. The first question is, does the shift make sense? So for example, let's say this I was very, very expressed. It is dropping by 25 points. So what we can say here is that the I is dropping significantly from natural to adapted, and we would want to ask them, does that shift make sense? Does it make sense that you're pulling back on your I at work? The second question is it necessary? And the third question is it effective? So the goal here is for them to identify any significant shifts, specifically 20 points or more, because that takes a lot of energy. And if we're exerting a lot of energy to shift in a way that is not natural to us, we want to make sure that we really truly need to do that. If the answer to all 3 questions is yes, it makes sense that I'm doing that, it's necessary, and it's effective, then the coaching would be, keep doing it, but make sure you're checking in on your energy levels and recharge when necessary. Recover, because you're shifting in a way that is not natural to you, and it's taking a lot of energy. And so you want to make sure that it's sustainable to avoid stress and burnout over time. Does that make sense so far?
Yes, that part is very interesting.
Okay, now, if the answer to any one of those 3 questions, either does it make sense, is it necessary, or is it effective, if the answer to any one of those questions is no, then the follow-up question would be, then why are you doing it? It's taking a lot of energy and it doesn't seem to be working, or maybe it's not even necessary. So let's see if there's a different way that you can be that is more natural to you and be more effective and not take so much energy. Does that make sense?
rất là nhiều. Có những cái bài test
May I have one question?
nó thay đổi, ví dụ như trong course mình đây này thì rõ ràng nó thay đổi cực lớn, kể cả cái điểm đi người ta còn có 2 điểm thôi. Và trước đó thì không phải vậy, và mình vẫn nhìn thấy là cái biểu hiện của người ta là một người vẫn đang rất là quyết đoán, một cái người vẫn hướng đến cái công việc rất là nhiều. Nhưng mà như vậy thì nó có ý nghĩa gì khi mà cái điểm đi đó họ xuống còn 2 điểm thôi?
I have a question about her clients that in the report, the result showing that they have a very low D point in the adapted, for example. But by nature, I mean, when she observed the client is still it show the high D or show very decisive, very affirmative. So is that any things to remark here or any strange thing here?
So let me make sure that I understood that, because you were kind of going in and out. So in the example that she's looking at, I think you said that in the natural, they're a high D, and in their adapted, they're a very low D. And is that a concern? Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So anytime that's exactly what we're talking about here. So thank you for that question. That's exactly what we're looking at. When a person shifts significantly, in that case, a high D to a low D, if it's more than 20 points, that's going to take a lot of energy. And so that's exactly why we want to ask those questions. Why are you feeling a need to pull far, far back on your D in your work environment? Does it make sense that you're doing that? Is it actually necessary? And is it effective? And again, if the answer to all 3 of those questions is yes, then great, keep doing it, but recover, because it's going to take a lot of energy. Now, sometimes people get used to significant shifts, and so over time, they don't notice as much of an energy drain. It could also be that sometimes they are actually energized by the work that they're doing, and so they're recovering as they're doing the work. But the key question is, how are you feeling? What are you noticing about your energy levels? And does all of your shifting make sense? And you want to just open up the conversation, and they'll really tell you what's going on. And they'll be able to guide that conversation. Let me give you an example. And this is the most extreme example that I have had so far. So I have a former colleague that I worked with for many, many years. And she had me do her disc with her. I was surprised after many years of working with her that in her natural, her I is 98. And it's because in her adapted style, which was the only way that I experienced her I was never noticeable. In fact, it was a 16. Now that is extreme. That was an 82-point shift in her I from what is natural to her. At the same time, her C, which in her natural was very low, went up by 40 points in her adapted style. Now that is extreme. That's a lot of energy that she's putting into shifting in a way that is extreme, the total opposite of who she is. Now, here's the effect of that. Over those years, and I'll just preface this by saying she's a lovely woman. I just love her. But in the many years that I worked with her, she fell asleep in every single meeting. She was exhausted. The only time she wasn't falling asleep was when she was doing the talking. And when she was talking about the things that she was doing in her life that weren't really even connected to work, but that gave her joy. And think about the I style. They like to talk about those things. She also had a lot of major health issues. In fact, she was constantly in and out of the doctor's office and even the hospital. She had a couple of surgeries during the time that I worked with her. That was severe. That is extreme. And that would be the conversation you would have is, wow, okay, your I is dropping by this much, your C is going up by this much. Let's ask some questions here. Does the shift make sense? Is it really necessary for you to do that? Because remember, this is your perception of how you think you need to be in order to be successful at work. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. And is it effective? And in her case, it wasn't effective. Now, I will just say this. I don't tell people you're in the wrong job. I don't say, you know, tell her. I wasn't telling her that it was effective. I'm asking those questions. Remember, ask, don't tell. So they'll tell you if it's effective or not. So since doing her disc, she has made some changes. Does that make sense? Does that help make that clear how to have those conversations?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Okay.
And if it's working, if the shifting is working, then again, by all means, they should keep doing it, but recharge, recover, recharge their batteries whenever they can and however they can. Okay, so that's the first thing we look at. The second thing we look at are the tensions. Remember that tensions have to do with pace and priority. So for this person, they are both, and we'll look at the adapted. We can look at both, the natural and adapted, since in this case, they're both the same. The S and the C are the expressed behaviors. They're the core styles. Now, the pace for both the S and the C are slow. They take their time, they think before they speak. So there's no tension there. But the S here is going to be focused on the people. The C is going to be focused on the task. So they might feel some inner tension. Oh, do I pay attention to the people or do I focus on the task right now? They're either going to find a way to naturally balance that out, or they're going to feel that tension. Does that make sense? Who is identifying with this right now? Raise your hand so I can see you. Yay! Awesome. Okay. So now that's internal tension. So I'll ask you in terms of external tension, what types of styles might this person have external tension with? What do they think, Anne?
D, don't have more tension with D.
Yes, yes, the D's and the I's. Now at the same time, there might be some tension. However, if we learn to adapt and we learn how all of this works, we get to understand the value that those other styles bring that we don't have. And that makes a much more cohesive team, because we really need all four styles. We can't all be all four styles at the same time, but those tensions will likely exist. Okay, so that's the second thing. The third thing that we look at are the emotions. So remember that the emotion of the D is anger and impatience. And remember that means there's a sense of urgency. The I emotion, remember, is optimism and trust. The S emotion is patience, and remember, they're non-expressive. So they tend to conceal their real feelings. And the C emotion is fear and concern. And remember, that's fear of making a mistake and getting caught having made a mistake. So the emotions in play here, the emotions that are expressed are patience, non-expression, fear, and concern. Now you can talk about shifts also in terms of emotions. So remember that example that I just gave you of my former coworker. Her I was going from a 98 in her natural to a 16 in her work environment. So the question I asked her in terms of emotion was, what is going on in your work environment that your optimism and trust are taking a complete nosedive? And remember that her C was going up by 40 points. That's a lot as well. And so the question I asked was, what is going on in your work environment that your fear and concern are going through the roof while your optimism and trust are taking a nosedive? Do you see how that can open up a conversation?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So any questions on those three things? The shifts, the tension. Oh, go ahead.
No, it's okay.
Okay. Oh, you were interpreting. So shifts, tensions, and emotions. Okay. So let's move on. So sometimes we'll have some unusual patterns. So one of them is what we call an over or under extension. We don't have any on this graph, but we're really close to one. So anytime you score above 90, that's known as an overextension. Under 10 is an underextension. Here's what that means. Remember, we've talked about how these are tendencies for your style blend. And in this case, your client's style blend. So they're tendencies, and sometimes a statement may or may not fit 100%, and that's okay. But when it is an over or under extension, that means it's a behavioral need. And so that person will structure their environment in order to meet the need. So we'll have to get you, that's actually a document that I think we'll need to maybe have translated for you, the over and under extensions. And it tells you exactly what they are for each one. So I'll give you an example, but we will follow up this training with the over and under extensions for each of the styles. So here's an example. An overextended S is really, an overextended anything is really just the extreme of that style. So they have an actual need for safety, security, and predictability. The underextended S would be the extreme opposite of the S. So they have a need for commotion, possibilities, chaos, and risk. So the key to that is knowing that an over or under extension is, if they're overextended, it's the extreme high of that style. If they're extended, it's the opposite of that style. And we'll follow this up by getting those documents to you so that they can be translated. Okay, some additional unusual graphs. Sometimes we have an undershift. That's when they're all 4 scores are under 50. An overshift is when they're all over 50. And then sometimes you have them all clustered in the center, and that's called a tight. So typically what's going on, and it's very, very rare, but it would be that person who is, somebody asked the question earlier today, and it was a great question. If the person is not focused on the same focus throughout the assessment, so on one question, they're answering from the perspective of work. And in the next question, they're thinking about hanging out with their friends, and they're not focused on the same thing. That's when we can get some of those really unusual ones.
Can you show this kind of slide? I mean, a picture that has the unusual result.
Sorry, Anne, I can't hear you very well. Were you asking for a picture of one?
Yeah, of the over. I mean the abnormal result of the graph. Yeah.
Yes. So it would. So let's see. I don't have any on this PowerPoint. I'll try to see. Maybe Jen can find some for me and email them to me. I could find them. It'd take me a little bit of time. I can follow up with some.
Okay.
Okay. Basically,
maybe later.
Yes. Yes. So so basically, if you have an undershift, it means they're all under 50, which means if you think about that, none of them are expressed behaviors because they're all below the energy line. If they're all over that energy line, then that means you have all 4 styles in play at the same time. And then that tight in the middle, that happens every once in a while. And what that means is that the person isn't, we call that a chameleon. So they can literally change and adapt very, very easily, but you can't really figure out what they're about because they can easily adapt to each of the styles very, very quickly. And they are each of the styles very quickly. You can't really figure them out. But we'll follow up with some graphs to look at for that as well. I'm going to write that down. But again, usually when you have unusual graphs like that, it's because they didn't maintain the same focus throughout the assessment.
Okay.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, so we talked about the over and under extensions and the unusual patterns. And we talked about, this is just kind of a review here, the shifts from the natural to adapted. And we want to ask them, does it make sense? Is it effective? And of course, I had that third question in there, is it necessary? Okay, so just a bit of a review. Okay, so let's do a little bit of a review. What pages of the DISC report are most important? Now, that's a little tricky. I haven't completely given you that yet, but the word sketches and the graphs are the critical pages that you would cover when you're working with a client. The bullet point pages are also very important. And those are great because they're very straightforward. So the second question here, how do you complete a debrief with limited time? So one of the documents that we sent over to you to be translated is the highlights, the DISC highlights. So it goes over the most important pages of the report, rather than going through all 38 pages with a client in one sitting. So again, if you have that limited time, you would want to spend the most amount of time on those pages on the highlights document. And I'll just tell you, they are essentially the word sketches, the graphs, and the bullet point pages.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. And finally, what resources do you have to support you? And again, those are some of the documents that we sent over to you. So, so we sent the highlights. We also sent a debrief guide. We sent a contract for change. Now that contract for change can be really helpful to guide you through a relationship with your client. It's exactly what it sounds like, contract for change. Now that doesn't mean that everybody needs to change, but certainly we all have a potential for improvement. And that's what that document is. It helps you sit down with your client and go through those pages of the report that we've talked about and identify areas where they can make some adjustments. And it's going to be different for every person. If I were to do this with my former colleague who is having a significant shift in both her I and her C, we would have that conversation. And we would talk about what can you do differently to be more effective and take less energy so that you're not sick and exhausted all the time. That would be the conversation for her. For someone else, it would be something else entirely. Now, sometimes you'll have clients who don't have very much change at all between their natural and their adapted styles. That's similar to the graph we just looked at. And that's okay, as long as it makes sense, it's necessary, and it's effective. What that typically means is that that person has found a work environment where they can pretty much be who they are naturally.
Okay, good.
Okay, makes sense?
Yeah.
Okay, great. All right, now we're gonna move on to the 12 behavioral tendencies. So what this covers is that we are a blend of all of the styles. Now, Anne, I don't know if on yours this says the integrated disc style relationships or the 12 tendencies. What does it say on yours?
It's here is the 12, the integrated.
Okay, so we
Yeah,
have
style.
made it, yeah, we have made a change. This is the section that's a little bit different. We are now calling these
Tức là bây giờ
the 12 behavioral tendencies. But they're showing the same thing. We just have updated it so that it's more clear. So what we're looking at here is that we are a blend of all 4 styles. And the 12 tendencies show us how we are likely to express certain behaviors based on our blend. Another way to look at that is not all I's are the same. Not all S's are the same, and we don't want to box anybody in. We're all a blend. So we're the result of all 4 blending together. So depending on how our styles integrate, we display different intensities of these these behavioral tendencies. Okay, so this is kind of the details page. Now, there is also a summary page, which is pretty self-explanatory. So we're not going to go through that. When we get to the details, there is a section at the very top of page 21 of your report that tells you the 3 things to pay attention to here. So those are called the interpretation notes. So the first thing to pay attention to is the frequency of behavior, the frequency of expressed style. So what that means is that the 12 tendencies are going to be listed in order of most frequently observed to least frequently observed for you and for each client. So everybody will have all 12, but in a different order. And that first, under that number 1, under the frequency, it will give you all 5 potential scores and what they mean. The second thing that we look for are the direction of the graphs. So that's over here. Okay. So as your graph moves to the right or to the left, it will show you how you will likely express this behavior. And if you score towards the center, that means your response will be situational. That means you could go either way. It really will depend on the situation. So let's look at this first one as an example. And then I promise we'll get to number 3. So for this person, their most frequently observed behavior is their personal drive. And in terms of personal drive, and they're natural and they're adapted, they scored a little bit differently. When you look at the graph, you see that in their natural style, they're more self-driven. When you look at their adapted style, that changes a little bit, and they're more towards the center, so they're situational. Now, page 20, which is the summary page, will give you all 12 behaviors on one page, and it will tell you what the scores are for each one. So it gets right to the point. And then starting on page 21, we get into these details with the visuals. Now, here's what's great about these statement sets. It will tell you how you are likely to express this behavior in both your natural and adapted. And the last sentence will always be a little bit of a directive. So think about this too. So it's very straightforward. It spells it all out for you. Does that make sense so far?
Okay.
We have questions, Anne? Are we good?
Có câu hỏi gì không ạ?
Okay. So the third thing that we look at here,
Vậy thì cái điểm thứ ba,
the blue box. So on each one of these, there will be a blue box. That represents, and you can see it on number 3 of your interpretation notes. This represents the majority of the population of people who have taken our disc. Specifically, for the C's in the room, 68% of people who have taken our disc. And this is where they score within this box. So what does that mean? If you score like this person outside of this blue box, that means that with respect to this behavior, personal drive, this person does things differently than the majority of other people. Now, that's not a bad thing. That's not good or bad. It's just what is. However, in this case, particularly in the natural style, it's important to note that that could be a cause of tension or miscommunication. So it's something to be aware of. It could also be that they bring something a little different to the world. They'll need to really pay attention to potential miscommunication. If you score inside the box, like on this second one here, this adapted style, which is very different than their natural style, they're inside the box. That means that they are adapting in a way that is similar to most other people. Does that make sense?
this also, yeah, and as is explained about that, this also has in the group report.
Oh, Anne, is that a question for me? I can't hear you.
No, it's not a question.
Okay.
It's just an additional comment. It's about that when we talk about the group report, that helps also with this graph, right?
Yes, there is a group report called the 12 tendencies, behavioral tendencies, that you can do. So it's one thing to know how we compare to the majority of other people. It's another thing to know how we compare to people on our team. And so there is a group report that you can pull that will show people on a team. And that will show any outliers who might be the source of tension, if at all. It can tell you all kinds of things about a team. For example, I coached a team that has one eye on the team. And there's a lot of tension on that team, particularly with her. When I look at her actual report, she is within the blue box on 8 out of 12. So she's not understanding why there's so much tension with her. But when I pull the report for that group, that entire group is a group of high C's and S's. And so she scores very differently. She is kind of an outlier on 8 of those 12 behaviors versus how she compares to the general population. So you can do a lot of teamwork with this section, and that is the biggest value of it from my perspective. Very valuable, and the new model is fantastic. Thank you to Jen for that. Okay, excellent. We're getting close to being done. You guys are doing so great. Okay. So now we have this disc wheel again, and from this perspective, you can actually, this is another group report that you can do. So you can plot up to 60 people on this wheel. Now remember, don't pay attention to the numbers that are on this wheel. When you use your reports, these are now the letter combinations that represent each segment. But again, you can plot up to 60 people. So there are several things that we can look at here. So we have the descriptions of each of the sections, okay? And we see where this person is plotted, both in their natural and their adapted. So there are these great descriptions of how these people show, how each style shows up. We can see the shifts in the style. So this person is shifting from their natural here to their adapted here. The more they are shifting, the farther apart that these points are plotted, the more the person is adapting, which means the more energy they're putting into adapting. The closer the plots, the less they're adapting. This will also show the intensity. So if a person is plotted all the way to the outer edge, that means it takes more energy for them to adapt. That means they're a pure style. So they're intense in their style. If they're plotted in the center, that's the person who is pulling from opposite styles at the same time. So this person right here would be a D-S combination. So they're in the D quadrant, but the S is pulling on them. So they're not a pure D out here. The S is pulling them towards the center. And so they're the opposite. So that's what these center ones are. Now that could be known as a risk, only because that means that that person has opposing behaviors and emotions in play at the same time. If a person is a DS or an SD, that means that at the same time they are patient and inpatient at the same time. So the key for those people is to learn which response is most appropriate in the situation. Do I need to be the D right now, or do I need to be the S right now? So the team report that you can do here is called the Team Dynamics Report, and it will show the entire team in both their natural and adapted. And then it walks you through all kinds of communication points and tips for how you can help that team work together.
That question is that to confirm again that in that team dynamic report we can have 60 people in that wheel.
I could only, sorry, I only caught part of that. Are you referring to the numbers?
Yeah, that means for the team report we can have about 60 person in the team report maximum. Correct. Right? And on the wheel we can see all the dots. I mean, all the star and all the dots of everyone in there?
That's correct. Now, here's the thing about that is that I believe only 5 or 6 people can fit in any one segment. So let's say you have 10 people that would be in this segment. It's only going to pull 5 or 6 of them, but that's kind of rare. So, yes. So 60 people, and it will tell you, it will give you the initials of each person and where they're plotted.
Yeah. Rita, I have a question that if, I mean, in the case that we have to report for 60 people and more than 10 people in one square, so how we realize or how we analyze that team report? I mean, because all of the 10 people will not appear in one square.
Yeah, so so if you have, and I think it's, I don't remember if it's 5 or 6, but that's the maximum that can fit in any one segment. However, when you're talking about a very, very large group, if one person falls off of that, it's not that big of a deal. You can still have the conversation of, if this is where the majority of the group is, or whatever patterns you see, it's still, the information is still valuable. Now, a person would be able to identify if, because they'll have their individual reports, so they would know if they're in a segment and it's not plotted there. But it's not going to have an overall impact of the coaching of that team. For example, one of the things that you can look at is, are there clusters of people all on one section and under or unrepresented styles elsewhere? If you already have a large number of people in one area, that's something you're going to focus on, even if 1 or 2 people aren't listed on that plot. It's already a cluster in that area. Does that make sense? Yeah, there's another piece to that in the group report, is that on another page it will actually show you all 4 quadrants, and it will list every single person in that quadrant. So you'll still see a list. It just might be that the dot isn't right on the wheel. You'll still see the list of people. So it's a key that will be next to the wheel.
Yeah.
Show everybody.
Yeah, và đấy chính là cái Okay.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Okay, so now go to the next page here. Okay, so adaptability, resources, and tools. So, boy, Jen, you might have to chime in there. I'm not sure what that one was.
So this is the end of the report, the pages that go through how to adapt and
oh, that's
what
that means.
at the
Okay.
end.
Yes. Okay. Great. Thank you. I thought maybe we were talking about our other resources. So at the end of the report, part 3 is all about adaptability. And so it walks you through step by step how to adapt, beginning with how to identify the style of another person, a reminder of the characteristics of each style and their communication preferences, how to identify tensions that will exist between people who have different styles. And then there are practice opportunities so that they can learn how to approach people in the way that they think that other person wants to be treated.
Okay.
Okay, great. Okay, so to review, so the 12 behavioral tendencies, I know that this slide hasn't been changed yet, but the 12 behavioral tendencies, I'm going to have the group partner up again and talk to each other about why that section is important. What is the value of that section?
Okay, we start to group and to discuss.
Okay.
We start the group. Yeah, we start the group discussion and review now. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, you just let me know when they're ready to move on.
Okay. Nào, chúng ta cứ lần lượt trả lời, chúng ta cùng nhau trao đổi từ những câu hỏi thôi, và khi nào xong thì chúng ta lại ok để cô lại tiếp tục. Cái đấy nó mới thể hiện sự khác biệt của người này với người kia.
Okay, are you there, Ann?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, great. Are they ready to move on?
Okay, các bạn sẵn sàng tiếp chưa?
Okay.
Yeah.
So then how can you help others understand the relationships between the D, I, S, and C force?
Yeah.
Again, that's the looking at the shifts, looking at the tensions, and looking at the emotions. Okay. And then just a quick, what applicability resources do you have? You have the team reports, you have the adaptability section.
Okay.
Okay.
Tức là chúng ta sẽ giải thích, chúng ta cùng trao đổi để với nhau ôn lại cái phần thứ hai là khi mà chúng ta giải thích cái sơ đồ ấy, thì chúng ta sẽ giải thích về cái điểm số đó như thế nào với khách hàng, mà đặc biệt là liên quan đến 3 cái hạng mục ấy, liên quan đến sự điều chỉnh điểm lệch như nhau như thế nào này, rồi về cái áp lực mà họ gặp phải như thế nào, cũng như là cái gọi là cái cảm xúc ấy của họ, cái vấn đề về cảm xúc họ để đạt ra. Đấy, và một cái điểm theo nữa đó là chúng ta cũng sẽ cùng trao đổi về các cái tài liệu báo cáo, chẳng hạn như qua cái bản để chúng ta có báo cáo nhóm, rồi chúng ta sẽ cùng với khách hàng trao đổi về cái phần là tính thích ứng sẽ như thế nào. Và sau khi làm test này xong thì chúng ta sẽ phải làm gì, cái hành động tiếp theo của khách hàng sẽ là làm gì.
Okay.
Okay.
So we are almost done. We are on the down slide here. So some review with a partner, and we'll go through these quickly unless you have any questions. So remind your partner, what is DISC? Okay. Was there a question there, Anne?
Okay. They just discuss and they ask about how to read the letters. I mean, where to find the letters of CD in the wheel. Actually, in the wheel, they see the letter now not the number anymore.
Right.
And they ask where they can find the meaning of each letter, like that.
Yes.
Or each combination.
Okay. So let me go back. So right here on the wheel, if you're seeing the letter combinations, it is telling you exactly what letter combination is primary or core for that person based on where they're plotted.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, you'll notice that some have a plus sign. Okay. So if you have a segment, and those, so if you have a segment that has a plus sign, the segment either to the right or to the left of it will have the same letters. And the letter preceding the plus sign is a higher score than in the segment next to it with the same letter combination. So if you have an IS next to an IS plus, the S score in the IS plus is higher than the S score in the plain old IS. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's what that means. Okay. So let's review these, and I'd love to maybe look at a couple of extra graphs at the before we end. So describing the D, I, S, and C styles and descriptions, I think they have that down pretty well. The value that each style brings to a team. What value does a D bring? What do they think in the room, Anne?
Nhóm
So the high D can be the leaders in the group.
They're the drivers. Exactly. They move things forward.
Rồi người đi là người người đi là người hướng tới kết quả, cho nên là sẽ nỗ lực để làm để đạt tới thành kết quả.
Now, any style can be a leader, but the D in particular is a driver and will tend to take authority and move things forward.
Tức là thực ra phong cách nào cũng có thể là leader, cũng có thể là trưởng nhóm hay là lãnh đạo, nhưng mà về mặt tự nhiên thì bởi vì người đi là người ta rất quyết liệt, rồi người ta luôn dẫn đầu, người ta luôn hướng tới tốc độ nhanh rồi các thứ, cho nên người ta sẽ có xu thế là dễ làm lãnh đạo hơn, thúc đẩy mà.
Okay, the value of an I.
Thế còn giá trị, của người ai ạ? Người ai thì sẽ mang lại gì cho tổ chức? It's an optimist environment.
Yes, they're an influencer and they.
Rồi họ là những người ảnh hưởng, họ rất là tích cực.
Glitter. Okay, the S, what do they bring to the team?
The S is like the glue for the members in the team. They engage the team member.
Perfect.
They bring peace to the world.
Yes, they bring peace to the world. That's exactly right.
Đúng rồi, họ mang hòa bình cho thế giới, đấy là đúng. Bring food to everyone.
Yes. And what about the C's? What do they bring?
Còn người C ạ, người C thì mang lại gì cho tổ chức? The C keep the rules and keep the order for the society.
That's right. Follow those rules.
Và đúng rồi, tuân thủ theo quy tắc, quy chế.
Okay, the natural versus adapted style, we talked about that a lot and they had great questions, so I think they have that down. We know why adaptability is important. Okay, and I know we've also practiced how to identify the style of another. That will take more practice and will get easier over time. Okay. You have some resources. Again, we've sent those forward. So you have the contract for change, you have the highlights report, and you have the debrief guide. Okay, so quick review, summary. The platinum rule, practice identifying behavioral styles and adapting for improved communication. So treating others as they want and need to be treated versus how we would want them to treat us. Adapting our style is not always easy. It takes energy and it takes practice. It may take some time and it might seem really difficult sometimes, but give it time, practice, and patience. So I am going to see if I can get some graphs up here. Let's Okay, so when you look at this one, let me put it in presentation mode. Let's look at shifting. Let's practice just a little bit. We have a couple of minutes. So on this one, from the natural to adapted, if we look at the shifts, we see this person goes from a 98 down to a 66. That's a very big shift and will take a lot of energy. This person shifts from a 98 to an 87. That's not significant, but something to notice. Their S shifts here by 18 points. And their C shifts by 18 points also. So something to take note of and ask them those 3 questions. Does it make sense that you're pulling way back on your D? Does it make sense that you're pulling back on your S and your C? Is it necessary and is it effective? And you want to ask this person if they're feeling drained. They may or may not be, but they'll want to pay attention to that. Now notice this person also has 2 overextensions above 90. So these are behavioral needs. The underextensions are also behavioral needs. When we look at tensions, this person is both a D and an I in their natural and adapted. They are a mover and a shaker. They have a lot of energy. They are very fast-paced. But the D is focused on tasks. The I is focused on people. So they will either feel that tension or they'll find a way to balance it out. External tension would be between this person and an S or a C. Emotions. This person's emotions that are in play are anger and impatience with the D, optimism and trust with the I. Okay.
Kathy,
Yes.
before you go on to the next one, I remember you saying that we would send them the translations for over and under extensions and the emotions. They're actually in the debrief guide already.
Oh, great. Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, so it's not a separate thing.
Oh, cool. I don't think I even knew that. All right. Did you hear that, Anne?
Yes, I hear that too.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, so we'll do one more and then we'll wrap up our time. Unless, actually, before I do one more, I want to make sure that we know what's next. So following, we are going to be sending a final knowledge check. And it will be some questions. It'll be in a written format. We'll figure out how to do that because they'll do it. We'll have to have it translated so that we'll know what their answers are. And then we're going to follow up. Are we also sending the study guide, Jen?
Yes, we will.
Okay. So those are the 2 things that will happen after this session. So I want to give an opportunity.
Can you repeat these 2 things? Can you repeat these 2 things? Okay.
Oh, sorry, I didn't catch that, Anne.
Okay, sorry, can you repeat these 2 things? I just want to, so it's the exam, the written exam, right?
Yeah,
And the second thing,
you're in and out, but I think you were asking me to repeat that, correct?
yes, please repeat.
Okay, so there will be a final knowledge check, and it will be multiple choice questions, and we'll have to work with you to get that translated, Anne, but that's all that it will be, and then we'll receive those and we'll be able to certify everybody from there. We are also going to send a study guide. And that's one that we sent forward beforehand to be translated. So actually, we won't be sending it. We will be asking Jenny and Quinn to send it. So we'll follow up with them to send forward the final materials.
Okay.
Okay. Wonderful.
Okay.
Do we have any last minute questions as we wrap up our
No.
time? I think we have 2 minutes.
Hỏi không khi phải thay đổi hành vi quá lớn á, thì nếu mà có bị áp lực thì mình làm thế nào để giảm tải áp lực?
Yeah, one question. That when we do the debrief to the clients and we see a big shift here, and when we ask them the question whether they feel drained or they are tired or the answer is yes, and how we can help them to have more energy, or how we can help them to overcome this situation.
Yes, and that will really depend on the person. A lot of times, what it takes is self-awareness. Often people don't realize what they're doing, or they don't realize that maybe it's not necessary for them to shift quite so much. So remember that the adapted style is your perception of how you think you need to be in order to be successful. It may be that that perception is incorrect, but that's a conversation to have with them. For example, is it necessary for you to pull way back on the I in you in order to be successful at work? If that's the case, that's just an example. I had a former colleague who was pulling way back on her I, different one than I talked about before. And when she saw that, it occurred to her that she hadn't had fun in her job in a very long time. So the next class she taught, she was a professor, she brought the fun back to the classroom. And the result was that obviously she had more fun, she had more joy in her work again. And what she found is that through making that change, she was more effective. So it really depends on the situation. It may be that their perception of how they think they need to be is incorrect. In some cases, they are making a shift that just is not necessary. In other cases, it may be that they're actually in the wrong role. That can be a harder conversation to have. I'm not in a position to tell somebody they're in the wrong job. You may or may not be. That just depends on what you are offering your clients. But if you're not in that position, you can lead them to that kind of a realization simply by pointing out you're in a situation where, in order to be successful, you are having to exert so much energy that it may or may not be sustainable. And so you need to make the decision about whether or not you want to continue doing that. You can certainly choose to, but it's going to take a lot of recovery so that you can be successful and maintain.
Okay, clear hơn.
The key there too is to know everybody knows how to be what is natural to them. So if they're shifting in a way that is not, they certainly know how to then pull back on that and be more truer to who they really are. So they know how to do it. The question is whether or not they want to or should. And they have to kind of work through that conversation with you. Does that help?
Yes, they have one more question.
Okay.
That question, the question is that when the natural style is formed, mean the natural behavioral style when that people have that natural behavior.
I'm sorry, sorry, I couldn't quite hear all of that.
Yeah, the first question is that when it's about the natural style.
Yes.
It's about their natural style, and they want to know that when that type of behavior is formed with that person. That means since born or when. I mean from what age that person have that natural style.
Yes. So, so DISC is both nature and nurture. Our frontal lobes are developing through about age, what is it, 24, Jen?
Yes, that's right. 24
Okay.
to 26.
Yes, 24 to 26. However, you can begin to start seeing the style of a person at a younger age. We don't recommend that that people take the DISC any younger than about 14, but they're still developing. So that may change a little bit, but you can start to see at a very young age certain styles emerge. You can tell if a person is relatively guarded versus really open. But the key is just to remember their brain, their frontal lobe is still developing through about 24 to 26.
Okay, let me translate first, okay?
Okay.
Hỏi cái tỷ lệ có đi
The second question. The second question is about the percentage of each type of the behavioral style, D, I, S, and C. But in the assessment 24 organization, I mean, how many people are doing this, have done assessment, and what is the percentage of each style?
Okay, so how many people have taken it, and what is the percentage of each? Is that correct? Is that the question?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so roughly the last we checked is about 750,000. I think probably by now we're closer to 800,000 people who have taken our assessment. And each region is different. So in the United States, 11%, roughly 11% are Ds, roughly 38% are Is, 28% are S's, and 23% are C's. Now, and I think it's changed even since I wrote that down, because people are continually taking the assessments, so that shifts quite a bit. We have a world map that we have been working on that shows each region and the current numbers that we have. I don't remember, I think we have it for Vietnam. I'll have to send that map to you.
I can send it to you right now, Kathy, if you want me to share it.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, that'd be great. In fact, I know I have it as well, but good luck for me finding it right away.
Yeah, please have to share with us on that.
Yeah, it's a really, give me just a moment. Jen's gonna email it to me unless I can find it soon.
Okay.
World map, hold on.
I just sent it.
Okay. Whoops. Oh, it's super small though. Oh, there we go.
Just zoom in on it.
Yep, there we go. Okay, so in Vietnam, 10% are Ds, 34.
Việt Nam là 10% đi, 24%. Okay, can you share or can you tell us again? Thank you.
Yes. We'll send that to you. Okay. Well, I want to thank everybody for your attention. I know that's a lot of information in 4 hours. You've all done great. And we'll send the follow-up materials to Jenny and Quinn and Anne. And I want to thank Anne for your being here and having enough energy to interpret. It's so great to have you. I know that's weird for you to say about yourself, but that's what I'm saying, so you have to say it.
Ok, các bạn có chia sẻ cái thi công hay chúng ta vẫy cho cô nhá. Vẫy cô vẫy ở đây này, quay ra đây để vẫy.
Okay, bye bye.
Have a great night and good night, good sleep.
Good night. Yes, it's very late here.
Yeah. Thank you for staying so late. Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Jen. Thanks. Bye bye.
Bye bye.